Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, Text 80. Maitreya Vachan, Bhagavatam Mukhyo Bhagavan,
Bhagavatam Mukhyo Bhagavan,
Nārado Hamsayorgatyam,
Nārado Hamsayorgatam,
Pradarshya hi amum amantriya,
Pradarshya hi amam amantriya,
Siddha lokam tato gaman.
Siddhalokam tato.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The great sage Maitreya continued, the supreme devotee, the great saint Nārada, thus explained to King Prācīnabarhi the constitutional position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity. After giving an invitation to the king, Narad Muni left to return to Siddhalok. Siddhalok and Brahmalok are both within the same planetary system. Brahmalok is understood to be the highest planet within this universe. Siddhalok is considered to be one of the satellites of Brahmalok. So it's the same planetary system. Brahmalok, Siddhalok means the Brahmalok is the topmost planet in this universe. So, and here we are hearing Siddhalok is one of the satellites of Brahmalok. The inhabitants of Siddhalok have all the powers of yogic mysticism. From this verse, it appears that the great sage Nārada is an inhabitant of Siddhalok, although he travels to all the planetary systems. All the residents of Siddhalok are spacemen, and they can travel in space without mechanical help. So no need of any spaceships or any gadgets for interplanetary travel. Narad Muni can travel anywhere, and so also the other residents of Siddhalok. The residents of Siddhalok can go from one planet to another individually by virtue of their yogic perfection. After giving instructions to the great king Prācīnabarhi, Narad Muni departed and also invited him to Siddhalok. So he's also telling him, oh, you can come and visit me there. Imagine, we can't even think about it. It's like saying, okay, come and visit my house, something like that. But it's a different planet altogether, and the highest planet. Prācīnabarhi Rajarishi,
Prācīnabarhi Rajarishi,
Prajas Sargabhirakshane,
Praja Sarvabhirakshane,
Adishya Putran Agamat,
Atishya Putran Agamat,
Tapase Kapilashramam.
Tapasi Kapila Shramam.
In the presence of his ministers, the saintly king Prācīnabarhi left orders for his sons to protect the citizens. He then left home and went off to undergo austerities in a holy place known as Kapilashram. The word Prajasarg is very important in this verse. When the saintly king Prācīnabarhi was induced by the great sage Nārada to leave home and take to the devotional service of the Lord, his sons had not yet returned from their austerities in the water. However, he did not wait for their return, but simply left messages to the effect that his sons were to protect the mass of citizens. So, the Prachetas, they were his sons, right? And they, under the guidance of Lord Shiva, under the instruction of Lord Shiva, they were doing austerities in that lake. And Prācīnabarhi is not waiting for them now, and he's leaving his home. Leaving his home, why? To engage in devotional service. To completely dedicate whatever remaining of his life is to engage in devotional service. According to Viraragavacharya, such protection means organizing the citizens into the specific divisions of the 4 varnas and 4 ashramas. It was the responsibility of the royal order to see that the citizens were following the regulative principles of the 4 varnas, namely Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and the ashramas, namely Brahmacharya, Grahasth, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. So the king was responsible to make sure that everyone is doing their duty, the social responsibility is being done. And the king would make sure that everyone is doing their social responsibility. It is very difficult to rule citizens in a kingdom without organizing this Varna Sharma Dharma. To rule the mass of citizens in a state and keep them in a complete progressive order is not possible simply by passing laws every year in a legislative assembly. The Varna Sharma Dharma is essential in a good government. One class of men, the Brahmanas, must be intelligent and Brahmanically qualified. Another class must be trained in administrative work, Kshatriya. Another in mercantile business, Vaishya, and another simply in labor, Shudra. These four classes of men are already there according to nature, but it is the government's duty to see that all four of these classes follow the principles of the Varnas methodically. This is called Abhirakshana or protection. So, by our nature, we have a natural inclination to act in one of the Varnas, you know, business or Brahmanical or Shudra or Kshatriya. They're like natural leaders, great administrators. Uh, that's for Kshatriyas, organizational skills. And then there is the business community, trading, banking, or finance, all that is Vaishya. And then Brahmanical is like studying, you know, trying like getting more knowledge, teachers, doctors, like, more study, more like studious. And Shudra is one who is serving all other classes. So it is significant that when Maharaj Prācīnabarhi was convinced of the goal of life through the instructions of Nārada, he did not wait even a moment to see his son's return, but left immediately. There were many things to be done upon the return of his sons, but he simply left them a message. He knew what his prime duty was. He simply left instructions for his sons and went off for the purpose of spiritual advancement. This is the system of Vedic civilization. So now he's completely understood what's the goal of life. Now he wants to retire. He knows his sons are capable, so he's leaving the kingdom to them. He's left the instructions for them. Sridhar Swami informs us that Kapilashram is located at the confluence of the Ganges and the Bay of Bengal, a place known now as Ganga Sagar. This place is still famous as a place of pilgrimage, and many millions of people gather there every year on the day of Makar Sankranti and take bath. It is called Kapilashram because Lord Kapila is living there to perform his austerities and penances. Lord Kapila propounded the Sankhya system of philosophy. So we heard about Lord Kapila in the third canto. Lord Kapila, he was doing his austerities there, and this is where Prācīnabarhi has gone. Atre kagra manadhiro
Tatraipagramanadhiro
Govinda charanambujam
Govindacharanambhujam
Vimukta sango nubhaja
Vimukta Sango Nubhujam
Bhaktya tat samyatam aga.
Bhaktya Tat Samvyatam Agad.
Having undergone austerities and penances at Kapilashram, King Prācīnabarhi attained full liberation from all material designations. He constantly engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and attained a spiritual position qualitatively equal to that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is a special significance in the words Tatsam Yatam Agad, which indicate that the king attained the possession of possessing the same status or the same form as that of the Supreme, of the Lord. This definitely proves that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always a person. In his impersonal feature, he is the rays of his transcendental body. When a living entity attains spiritual perfection, he also attains the same type of body known as Satchidananda Vigraha. So Prācīnabarhi, he's gotten a transcendental body. God's body is transcendental, Satchidananda. So even Prācīnabarhi has gotten a Satchidananda body. Just as, we have our bodies made of blood and mucus and all these things. So God's body is Satchidananda. And every spirit soul has a Satchidananda body, a spiritual body. So the impersonal feature of God, impersonal feature is when we think that God is not a person, but light, that light is actually coming from the body of God. The light, what is the origin of the light? That is the body of God, His Satchidananda body. Tomorrow we are going to celebrate the appearance of Lord Krishna, of God, 5,000 years ago. So we have to understand that his appearance is transcendental, his form is transcendental. So when this spiritual body never mixes with the material elements. Although in conditional life, the living entity is surrounded by material elements: earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and ego. He remains always aloof from them. In other words, the living entity can be liberated from the material condition at any moment, provided that he wishes to do so. So it depends on our desire. Here, Prabhupada is saying, you see, because the soul can never become material. The soul is always spiritual. Although we are covered by this material, subtle body and gross body, the soul never becomes material, always spiritual, always Satchidananda. So here Prabhupada is pointing out that the soul can be liberated from the material condition at any moment, provided that he wishes to do so. So it depends on our desire. If we wish to, we can be liberated at any moment. The material environment is called Maya, according to Krishna. Devi hi esha ganamayu, mama maya duratyaya, mam eva ye prapadyante, mayam etam tarantite. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Bhagavad Gita 7:14. So Krishna is saying that this material world, the material energy, he's saying it belongs to him. Material energy consisting of the three modes of nature. We were hearing that how the body is under the control of the modes and everything we do is under the influence of the modes. So it's by ourselves we can't get out of it. But Krishna is saying those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So he's telling us how we can get out of the material world. He's clearly telling us, oh, you want to get out of the material world? Okay, you surrender to me and you can get out. As soon as the living entity engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he immediately attains freedom from all material conditions. Sagunan samatityayitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So, the pure devotee. The pure devotee, that's why he's called liberated. And Krishna also says that pure devotional service begins from liberation. In the material state, the living entity is on the Jiva Bhuta platform. But when he renders devotional service to the Lord, he is elevated to the Brahma Bhuta platform. On the Brahma Bhuta platform, the living entity is liberated from material bondage and he engages in the service of the Lord. So the pure devotee, he's understood, I'm spirit soul, I'm a part and parcel of God, and he's engaging in this loving service to God. There is this loving relationship between the soul and God. In this verse, the word dhira is sometimes read as vira. Actually, there's not very much difference. The word dhira means sober and vira means hero. One who is struggling against Maya is a hero, and one who is sober enough to understand his position is a dhira. Without becoming sober or heroic, one cannot attain spiritual salvation. So, becoming Dhira and Veera. So Dhira becoming sober, understanding what is the position, and Veer becoming a hero to struggle against Maya. Prabhupada is saying without becoming sober or heroic, one cannot attain spiritual salvation. So the more we hear, the more we chant, the more we can become hero or heroic or sober. It helps us. Etad adhyatma parokshyam
Etat adhyatma paroksham
Gitam deva shinanaga
Vitam devashinam nagaha
yashavayit yashranyuyat
Yashravayet yashmiyat
salingena vimuchyate.
Salingena vimuchyate.
My dear Vidur, one who hears this narration concerning the understanding of the living entity's spiritual existence as described by the great sage Narada, or who relates it to others, will be liberated from the bodily conception of life. This material creation is the spirit soul's dream. Actually, all existence in the material world is a dream of Mahavishnu, as Brahma Samhitas describes. Ya karana Navajade bhajati sma yoga nidram ananta jagat anta saroma kupa. This material world is created by the dreaming of Mahavishnu. He is in yoga nidra. But his sleeping is very different than our sleeping. When Mahavishnu sleeps his transcendental sleep. He's creating universes and universes when he's sleeping. When we are sleeping, we are as good as dead. We don't remember anything. The real factual platform is the spiritual world, but when the spirit soul wants to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's put into this dreamland of material creation. So one may think that, oh, well, then I'm not really here. No, we are here. Why is it said a dreamland? We thinking we are the body, that is the dream. We are very much right now inside the body. We are very much right now inside this material world. But we thinking that, oh, my identity is this and this body. That is a dream. All the activities that we are doing, because it's temporary. It's temporary. That's why it's called dreamlife. Our real position is in the spiritual world. Our real form, real body, real activities is all in the spiritual world. After being in contact with the material modes of nature, the living entity develops the subtle and gross bodies. When the living entity is fortunate enough to associate with Sri Narad Mahamuni or his servants, he is liberated from this dreamland of material creation and the bodily conception of life. So, association with Narad Muni or his disciples, one can get liberated from material world, bodily conception of life. Here Maitreya Muni is giving a benediction that whoever is hearing this narration or whoever tells this narration to others, so one who's hearing, one who's speaking, will be liberated from this material world. So we can see that how compassionate the devotees are, how purifying the association of the devotees is. That's what Maitreya Muni is saying. One who's hearing Narad Muni's instructions, one who's repeating Narad Muni's instructions can get liberation. Etan mukundaya shasa Etan mukundaya shasa bhuvanam punanam
Etam kunda yashasa bhuvanam punanam
Divarshivarya mukhanihrishritamatma shaucham
Iva shivarya mukhani shrutam atmasaucham
Yakirtayamanam adhigacchati parameshtayam
Yoti yamanam adhigachati paramishtyam.
Nasmin bhavibhramati mukta samastabandha.
Nasmin bhave brahmati mukta samastabandha.
This narration spoken by the great sage Nārada is full of the transcendental fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, this narration, when described, certainly sanctifies this material world. It purifies the heart of the living entity and helps him attain his spiritual identity. One who relates this transcendental narration will be liberated from all material bondage and will no longer have to wander within this material world. As indicated in verse 79, Narad Muni advised King Prācīnabarhi to take to devotional service rather than waste time performing ritualistic ceremonies and fruitive activities. The vivid descriptions of the subtle and gross bodies in this chapter are more scientific, and because they're given by the great sage Narad, they are authoritative. Because these narrations are full of the glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they constitute the most effective process for the purification of the mind. So, hearing from Narad Muni is a pure devotee. So, what he speaks, he is an authority. He's a great spiritual master, he's a pure devotee, and so what he speaks, it's all truth. And Narad Muni is telling Prācīnabarhi, don't waste time in doing these, rituals just for the sake of going to heavenly planets or getting some pious activity. Engage in devotional service. Narad Muni is telling Prācīnabarhi. And he told him about the subtle and gross bodies. We were trying to hear about that the soul gives up the gross bodies, that it has the same subtle body, and it's the subtle body which is the storehouse of all the desires, of all the experiences. And with this subtle body, we are creating another body for ourselves. So, based on our desires, we are creating another body. So, based on our consciousness, we are creating another body. So, then, and also we heard about the glory of the Supreme Lord. Hearing the glories of the Supreme Lord constitute the most effective process for the purification of the mind. To understand God's glories helps us to purify our heart. The more we hear about God's name, fame, qualities, pastimes, the more our heart gets purified. That's the reason we are always advised to hear constantly from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirmed, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. The more we talk of Krishna, think of Krishna, and preach for Krishna, the more we become purified. Krishna is all pure. So when we are speaking of Krishna, we are thinking of Krishna, preaching of Krishna, for Krishna, we are getting more purified. This means we no longer have to accept a hallucinatory, gross, and subtle body, but instead attain our spiritual identity. One who tries to understand this instructive spiritual knowledge is delivered from this ocean of nations. The word parameshtyam is very significant in this connection. Parameshtyam is also called Brahmalok. It is the planet on which Lord Brahma lives. The inhabitants of Brahmalok always discuss such narrations so that after the annihilation of the material world, they can be directly transferred to the spiritual world. One who is transferred to the spiritual world does not have to go up and down within this material world. Sometimes spiritual activities are also called Parameshtyam. So the inhabitants of Brahmalok, like we are the inhabitants of this earth planet. Similarly, there are living entities who are living on Brahmalok, where Lord Brahma lives. And what are they doing? They are hearing about the pastimes, the glories of the Supreme Lord. They are discussing such narrations. Why? So that after they give up this gross body, After they have to die, they can go to the spiritual world. No need to take birth again in the material world. Till the time we are in the material world, sometimes we will be in heavenly planets, sometimes we'll be in earthly planets, sometimes we'll be in the hellish planets. But once we reach the spiritual world, there is no change of body over there. We are in our spiritual body and we do our eternal activities in the spiritual world. And the spiritual world is full of bliss. Adhyatma parokshyamidam
Adhyatma paroksham idam
maya digatam adbhutam
maya digatam adbhutam
evam striyashrama pumsas
evam striyashrama pumsha
chinno mutra cha samshaya.
chino mudrascha samshaya.
The allegory of King Puranjan described herein, according to authority, was heard by me from my spiritual master, and it is full of spiritual knowledge. If one can understand the purpose of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. Although one may not understand what transmigration of the soul actually is, one can fully understand it by studying this narration. The word striya, meaning along with the wife, is significant. The male and female living together constitute the sum and substance of material existence. The attraction between male and female in this material world is very strong. In all species of life, the attraction between male and female is the basic principle of existence. The same principle of intermingling is also in human society, but is in a regulative form. Material existence means living together as male and female and being attracted by one another. However, when one fully understands spiritual life, his attraction for the opposite sex is completely vanquished. By such attraction, one becomes overly attached to this material world. It is a hard knot within the heart. So, this is a conditioned life. Our conditioned life is like that. And it's like a knot which keeps us bound here to the material world. Pumsa striya mithuni bhavameta tayor mithore dayagranthim ahu ato grahashetra sutapta vitte janasya mohoyam aham mameti. Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 5, Text 8. Everyone comes to this material world attracted to sense gratification. And the hard knot of sense gratification is the attraction between male and female. By this attraction, one becomes overly attached to the material world in terms of Graha Kshetra Sutta Apta Vitta, that is, home, land, children, friends, money, and so forth. Thus, one becomes entangled in the bodily conception of I and mine. So, this attraction is what keeps us here in the material world. Home, land, children, friends, money. And when we are thinking, oh, this is I and this is mine. However, if one understands the story of King Puranjana and understands how, by sexual attraction, Puranjana became a female in his next life, one will also understand the process of transmigration. Special note, according to Vijaya Dwaj Tirtha, who belongs to the Madhvacharya Sampradaya, the first two of the following verses appear after verse 45 of this chapter, and the remaining two verses appear after verse 79. So the next, there are going to be other four verses coming along, and according to Vijaya Dwaj Tirtha, they are coming after verses 45 and 79. So, here to understand how the transmigration of the soul is happening, man to woman, woman to man, because of this attraction that we are having. Sarvesham eva jantunam
Sarvesham evam jantunam
satatam deha poshane
tatatam dehaposhanam
asti pragya sama yatta
asti prajna samayattam
ko visheshas tadanina.
vishesa pradananam
Labdha vehante manushyatvam
labdha vihante manushyatvam
itva dehadi asatgraham
yatva dehadi asagraham
atma striya vihayedam
atma striya vihayedam
jivatma sa vishishyate.
Divatma pravishyate.
A desire to maintain body, wife, and children is also observed in animal society. The animals have full intelligence to manage such affairs. If a human being is simply advanced in this respect, what is the difference between him and an animal? One should be very careful to understand that this human life is attained after many, many births in the evolutionary process. A learned man who gives up the bodily conception of life, both gross and subtle, will, by the enlightenment of spiritual knowledge, become a prominent individual spirit soul, as the Supreme Lord is also. It is said that man is a rational animal. But from this verse, we can also understand that rationality exists even in animal life. Unless there is rationality, how can an animal maintain its body by working so hard? That the animals are not rational is untrue. Their rationality, however, is not very advanced. In any case, we cannot deny them rationality. The point is that one should use one's reason to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For that is the perfection of human life. So we have the intelligence by which we can try to understand God. Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam, evam yoveti tattvataha, tyakva deham punarjanma naiti mameti. So Arjuna. Krishna is saying that one who can understand that his appearance, his form, his activities are transcendental, does not need to take birth again in the material world, but goes to the spiritual world. So in the human form of life, we can do that. In animal body, we cannot. But in human body, we have this capacity. Bhakti Krishna Daya Jiveshiv
Bhakti Krishna Dayaji Vishve
Vakuntha Jnanam Atmani
Atmanam Atmani
Yadi Syad Atmano Bhuya
Yadi Syad Atmano Bhuyam
Apavargastu Samsrite.
Apavartastu Samsriti.
If a living entity is developed in Krishna consciousness and is merciful to others, and if his spiritual knowledge of self realization is perfect, he will immediately attain liberation from the bondage of material existence. In this verse, the words Daya Jiveshu, meaning the mercy to other living entities, indicate that the living entity must be merciful to other living entities if he wishes to make progress in self realization. This means he must preach this knowledge after perfecting himself and understanding his own position as an eternal servant of Krishna. Preaching this is showing real mercy to living entities. So what we are hearing is that giving this knowledge of self-realization of Krishna consciousness to others. He said he must if one wishes to make progress. So that's why I said the more we give others this knowledge of Krishna consciousness, the more we will also be able to understand it ourselves. Preaching is showing real mercy. Other types of humanitarian work may be temporarily beneficial for the body, but because a living entity is spirit soul, ultimately one can show him real mercy only by revealing knowledge of his spiritual existence. Because till the time the soul is here in the material world, we are going to suffer. Only when we can understand, oh, we need to get out of this material world, we need to go to the spiritual world. Only time when we are able to do that, then we can get real happiness. So, this is why it said that preaching is showing real mercy to living entities, because then it's helping everyone to get out of this material world, helping everyone to become eternally happy. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Jivera Swarupai Krishnera Nityadas. Every living entity is constitutionally a servant of Krishna. One should know this fact perfectly and should preach it to the mass of people. If one realizes that he is an eternal servant of Krishna but does not preach it, his realization is imperfect. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur therefore sings, Dushta mana, tumi kishera Vaishnav, pratisthara tare nirjanera ghare, tava harinama kevala kaitava. My dear mind, what kind of Vaishnava are you? Simply for false prestige and a material reputation, you are chanting the Hare Krishna mantra in a solitary place. In this way, people who do not preach are criticized. There are many Vaishnavas in Vrindavan who do not like preaching. They chiefly try to imitate Haridas Thakur. Actual result of their so-called chanting in a secluded place, however, is that they sleep and think of women and money. Similarly, one who simply engages in temple worship but does not see to the interests of the mass of people or cannot recognize devotees is called a Kanishta Adhikari. Acharyam eva haraye pujam yashadha ye hate na tad bhakteshu chanyeshu sabhakta prakrita smrita. Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 2, Text 47. So, this is the instruction that also Lord Chaitanya gave, that Yare Dekha Tare Kaha Krishna Upadesh. Anywhere you go, wherever, whoever you meet, Lord Chaitanya says, you speak to him about Krishna. So, whatever we know about Krishna, we try to give it to others. Of course, we should try to do it in a manner that people are receptive, that people who want to listen, we can't force people who don't want to listen. So, whoever is willing to listen, speak to them about Krishna or take part in Harinam. Taking part in Harinam is we're giving mercy to everyone, all the living entities. Adrishtam Trishtavan Nangshe
Adrishtam Drishtavannakshe
Bhutam Swapnavad Anyatha
Bhutam Swapnavad Anyatha
Bhutam Bhavat Bhavishyatcha
Bhutam Bhavat Bhavishyatcha
Suktam Sarvaraho Raho.
Saptam Sarvorahoraha.
Everything happening within time, which consists of past, present, and future, is merely a dream. That is the secret understanding in all Vedic literature. Factually, all of material existence is only a dream. Thus, there is no question of past, present, or future. Persons who are addicted to karma vichar, which means working for fruitive happiness through fruitive activities, are also dreaming. Similarly, past happiness and present happiness are merely dreams. The actual reality is Krishna and service to Krishna, which can save us from the clutches of Maya. For the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 7.14, Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. Those who surrender unto me can easily cross beyond my illusory energy. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 29th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Talks Between Nārada and King Prācīnabarhi. So this brings us end to this chapter. We got a benediction. If we can try to understand the transmigration of the soul, Maitreya Muni was saying that the allegory which Narad Muni is explaining, that how the soul is changing from one body to another. If we can are able to understand it, then we can get out of this material world. So, chapter 30, the activities of the Prachetas. Vidura Vachan.
Vidura Uvacha.
I'm sorry, did you have any comment or did you want to add anything to what we read before we start another chapter?
Yeah, like we spoke yesterday, right? How our mind is manifesting everything. So we have to keep our minds fixed on Krishna. That's very important. That's probably what, what we heard in even Puranjana's story, maybe. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, te tvaya bihita brahman
Ye tvaya bihita brahman
sota prācīnabarhi
Suta Prācīnabarhi
te rudra gitena harim
Te Rudra Gitena Harim
siddhim apu pratoshyakam.
Siddhim Apu Pratoshikam.
Vidur inquired from Maitreya, O Brahmana, you formerly spoke about the sons of Prācīnabarhi and informed me that they satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead by chanting a song composed by Lord Shiva. What did they achieve in this way? In the beginning, Maitreya Rishi narrated the activities of the sons of Prācīnabarhi. The sons went beside a great lake, which was like an ocean, and fortunately finding Lord Shiva, they learned how to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by chanting the songs composed by Lord Shiva. So, why was Lord Shiva chanting this song? To please Krishna. Why are the Prachetas chanting this song? To please Krishna. So we can see the chanting is for the pleasure of God. This is how we can please God, by chanting. Now their father's attachment for fruitive activities was disapproved by Nārada, who therefore kindly instructed Prācīnabarhi by telling him the allegorical story of Puranjana. Now Vidur again wanted to hear about Prācīnabarhi's sons, and he was especially inquisitive to know what they achieved by satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Here the words Siddhim Apu, or achieved perfection, are very important. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.3, Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye. Out of many, many millions of people, one may be interested in learning how to attain success in spiritual matters. The supreme success is mentioned also in Bhagavad Gita 8.15. Mam upetya punarjanma dukkhalayam ashasvatam napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam kata. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. And what is that highest perfection? That is also explained in that verse. The highest perfection is to return home, back to Godhead, so that one will not have to return to this material world and transmigrate from one body to another in the dream of material existence. By the grace of Lord Shiva, the Prachetas actually attained perfection and returned home back to Godhead after enjoying material facilities to the highest extent. Maitreya will now narrate that to Vidu. So, going back to Godhead, that was the perfection, the highest perfection. The Vidur was saying, what perfection did the Prachetas achieve? They went back home, back to Godhead, by pleasing the Lord. Kimarhasapatyeha paratravath
Varhasya Patyeha Paratravatha
Kevalyanatha Priyaparshvavartinu.
Kaivalyanatha Priya Vapashva Vartina.
Asadya devam girisham yatra chaya.
Asadya devam girisham yatra chaya.
Prabhu param no namatha prachetasa.
Prapu param nunam atha prachetasya.
My dear Bharhaspatya, what did the sons of King Barisha, known as the Prachetas, obtain after meeting Lord Shiva? I'm sorry, who is very dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the bestower of liberation. Certainly, they were transferred to the spiritual world. But apart from that, what did they obtain within this material world, either in this life or in other lives? So he's saying, okay, for sure they went back to Godhead, but what else did they get? All types of material happiness are obtained in this life or in the next life, on this planet or on another. The living entity wanders within this material universe in so many species of life and so many planetary systems. The distress and happiness obtained during the span of life are called iha, and the distress and happiness obtained in the next life are called paratra. Actually, Lord Mahadev Shiva is one of the great demigods within this material world. Generally, his blessings bestowed on ordinary people mean material happiness. Sorry. The predominating deity of this material world, Durga, is under the control of Lord Mahadev Girisha. Thus, Lord Mahadev can offer anyone any kind of material happiness. Generally, people prefer to become devotees of Lord Girisha to obtain material happiness. But the Prachetas met Lord Mahadev by providential arrangement. Lord Mahadev instructed them to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he personally offered a prayer. So, what Prabhupada is explaining that Lord Shiva is one of the great demigods and he can give one great material happiness, great material benedictions. And usually that is the reason why people approach Lord Shiva, because he's easily satisfied, can fulfill our desires. So that's why one is inclined to worship Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is the husband of this material energy of Durga Devi. She is the deity of this material world. And she, of course, is a chaste woman, so she's always listening to her husband. And whoever Lord Shiva is pleased upon, then Durga Devi gives them all the benefits of material opulence. But here, Lord Shiva is in fact, Lord Mahadev instructed them to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he personally offered a prayer. As stated in the previous verse, Rudra Gitena, simply by chanting the prayers offered by Lord Shiva to Vishnu, the Prachetas were transferred to the spiritual world. Sometimes devotees desire to enjoy material happiness also. Therefore, by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the devotee is given a chance to enjoy the material world before his final entrance into the spiritual world. Sometimes a devotee is transferred to a heavenly planet, to Janalok, Maharlok, Tapolok, Siddhalok, and so on. However, a pure devotee never aspires for any kind of material happiness. The pure devotee is consequently transferred directly to Vaikuntha, which is described here as Param. In this verse, Vidur asks Maitreya, the disciple of Brahaspati, about the different achievements of the Prachetas. So Krishna is kind. If a devotee has a desire to enjoy the material world before he goes to the spiritual world, Krishna fulfills that desire. He lets him live in these heavenly planets where it's all mode of goodness, Janalok, Mahalok, Tapalok. Over there is no passion and ignorance. So there is general happiness in this material world. And then the devotee is taken to the spiritual world. But Prabhupada is pointing out that the pure devotee, he wants to go directly to the spiritual world. He does not want to go to any of these higher planets to enjoy heavenly pleasures. He wants to go to the spiritual world and enjoy spiritual bliss. Over there, engage in spiritual activities, devotional service. and serve Krishna personally. So let's stop here because this is a little longer. Won't be able to finish it. Thank you so much for listening and enjoying it. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Hare Krishna.